Hi, this is Victor Antonio with another Sales Influence Moment. Today I want to talk about that famous objection we often hear, especially in the B2C market, that's too expensive. Now, what I want to do today is dissect, really, what does that phrase mean? That's too expensive. What does the customer really mean? But believe it or not, there's 4 meanings behind that statement that I've identified. See if you agree. The first one is when somebody says that's too expensive, are they really saying that's too expensive compared to X? In other words, compared to a direct competitor or an alternative solution. So in other words, relative to somebody else, you're too expensive. Is that what they're saying? Or maybe they're saying, well, that's too expensive. What they're really saying is more than I expected to pay. Well, Victor, that's more than I expected to pay. Now, they're not saying no. They're just saying that's more than I expected to pay. So when they say that's too expensive, it doesn't mean that they can't afford it. It's more than they expected to pay. So our job as salespeople is to what? Build that value so they can see the value of what we're offering and then are willing to pay that price. But maybe in some cases, this is true, they simply can't afford it. That's too expensive means they can't afford it. They just simply don't have the money. Now let's assume that that's a small percentage of the market. And let's move those aside because we can't sell to those folks. But maybe when they say that's too expensive, it's not that they can't afford it. Maybe they're asking you, code, do you have a payment plan? Do you have some financing options? Can I break the payments up? Or do you have net 30, net 60, net 90? In other words, can you help me make the payments? I like what you're selling, but I don't know if I can afford to pay it in one lump sum. Victor, I can't afford to pay $40,000. Can you break it up into 3 or 4 months? Get the idea? So sometimes when a client says that's too expensive, they're not saying I can't afford it. That's not what they're saying. They may be saying, well, compared to somebody else, please show me why this is a little more expensive. Or they may be saying, it's more than I expected to pay, so show me the extra value. Or maybe they're simply saying, do you have some payment options? Think about it the next time you hear that's too expensive, and then analyze it and maybe ask the customer, what do you really mean when you say that's too expensive? This is Victor Antonio with another Sales Influence Moment reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care.
Cash advances. A merchant cash advance pretty much sells itself. It's one of those things that either the merchant needs it or they don't. It's very much a timing thing. So you have 2 goals when you're selling merchant cash advances. Your first goal is to find what I call the low-hanging fruit. Pick the low-hanging fruit. Find the people that need a merchant cash advance now. Now, in my experience, that number is low. It's probably about 1 out of 15 to 1 out of 20 merchants that you would talk to. But I mean, it doesn't take that long to talk to 15 or 20 merchants. So if you get out in the field, if you have 50, 60 clients, you probably got 2, 3, maybe 4 people who want a merchant cash advance right now. And if they knew that you offered it, they would buy it right now. Okay? So number 1 is you're trying to find the low-hanging fruit, the people that actually need a merchant cash advance now. The second goal, and maybe even the larger goal that you're trying to accomplish here, is you're trying to get your name out there in front of your merchants and local business owners as somebody that does offer short-term working capital. And that's the terminology you want to use. We offer short-term working capital, okay? Now, the reason that's important is because maybe 1 out of 15 businesses need a merchant cash advance right now, but there's probably another 6 or 7 of those 15 business owners that will need a merchant cash advance sometime in the next 3 years. Every time you sell a merchant cash advance, if you're with a good company, you should be making some serious money on that, right? So if you're making a lot of money on these, you want to make sure that everybody in your community knows that you do offer them. Definitely your clients need to know that you offer them so they don't go to one of your competitors to get a merchant cash advance when they need the money. And so again, it's really a unique thing because when you get out there in the field and walk into a business, you're going to be surprised by the reaction. The reaction is going to be very black and white. Usually they're not upset that you offered it, but they're usually going to say something like either, yeah, we're actually good, we have a line of credit, or you know what, we actually we have a relationship with our banker, or we're fine right now, we're doing pretty good. And in that case, there's no reason to push past it or try to overcome the objection. It's not really an objection, it's true. If they don't need it, they don't need it, and they're not going to take it. So either they need the money or they don't need the money. If they don't need the money, they don't need it. And so this is not the kind of thing you're going to overcome all these objections and everything like that. If at the very beginning, when you make the presentation, it's just about whether or not they've considered it. And we'll talk about that in a second. Now,
keep yourself positive, cheerful, and goal-oriented. Sales success is 80% attitude and only 20% aptitude. Hello, I'm Brian Tracy, and today I'm going to share with you 6 things sales professionals should never do when trying to make a sale. If you can avoid these mistakes, you'll be on your way to becoming a leader in your field and enjoying the wealth that comes with it. The first thing a sales professional should never do is never allow a prospect to lead the sales process. The best way to control a sales interaction and take the lead in the sales process is to ask questions. Asking quality questions can uncover specific personal or corporate issues and will allow you to evaluate whether or not your product can solve the specific problem your prospect is facing. This is also the best way to discover your prospect's real needs and values and establish yourself as an expert. The second thing sales professionals should never do is to neglect their pre-meeting research. If you're fortunate enough to get a meeting with an important prospective company or executive that you're hoping to sell to, you better have done your research, your homework. I unfortunately learned this lesson the hard way. I remember a specific situation in which I had finally connected with a prospect that I'd been trying to get a hold of for quite some time, and I set up a meeting. However, I didn't take the time to research the company before I sat down with them and spent the vast majority of the meeting learning fundamental basics about the company. Instead of presenting a solution that my product would solve, I asked them questions about what they did and how long they'd been doing it. Needless to say, I did not successfully close that sale, and I also never neglected to do my research ahead of time again. So invest time in learning about your prospect before you call them and set up a meeting, and you'll have a much better chance of getting to your sales objective. The third thing sales professionals should never do is talk too much during the sales interaction. Too many salespeople will get into a conversation and talk way too much about their expertise and their product, its features, their service, their company, and so on. This dialogue does absolutely nothing to convince a prospect that they should buy from you, and instead makes them think that you don't care about their needs. Engaging with a prospect by asking them about their experience and needs allows you the time to determine the most effective strategy or solution for them. The fourth thing sales professionals should never do is to provide the prospect with information that is irrelevant. When I was working in the corporate world, I was subjected to countless presentations where the salesperson shared information that was completely meaningless to anyone in the room. Remember, a prospect cares very little about your financial backing or who your other clients are. They only care about whether or not your product or service is going to help them personally. Make the most of your presentation by telling your prospect how they will benefit from your product or service until they're convinced that it will solve their problem or make their life easier. The fifth thing that sales professionals should never do is to be unprepared for your sales presentation. I remember when I was first getting into sales, I made a cold call expecting to get my prospect's voicemail. When he unexpectedly answered the phone, instead of asking qualified questions that would have allowed me to take control of the interaction, I spent the entire conversation answering his questions. This allowed him to take total control of the sale, or as I should say, the non-sale. Whether you're making a cold call or giving a sales presentation, it's absolutely critical that you are prepared, even over-prepared. This means having all relevant information at your fingertips, including pricing, testimonials, samples, and a list of questions you need to ask to direct the sales conversation. I suggest creating a checklist of all of the information you will need and reviewing it before your next call or presentation. No matter how many times you've made a sales call or given the same presentation, always review your material ahead of time. You only have one opportunity to make a great first impression, so don't waste it. Finally, the last thing that a sales professional should never do is to fail to ask for the sale. If you're selling a product or a service, you have the obligation to ask the customer for a commitment, particularly if you've spent time researching and discovering their needs, and you know that your product or service can help them. As long as you ask for the sale in a non-threatening, confident, and cheerful manner, people will usually respond favorably. Even the most seasoned sales professionals make mistakes from time to time, but if you can avoid these 6 things sales professionals should never do, you'll decrease the likelihood of making sales blunders and increase your ability to make and close the sale. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a thought to share with your friends and followers. It is this: keep yourself positive, cheerful, and goal-oriented. Sales success is 80% attitude and only 20% aptitude. Now, I'd love to hear from you, so my question today is, which closing strategy has worked best for you in the past and why? Leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to follow up with you. If you enjoyed this video and feel it was valuable in teaching you what not to do in sales, subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends or anyone else who might benefit from this information. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you want to change your future, take action, and take action now.